Welcome to the Inner Light Companion, a space to personalize your spiritual journey with the 12 sacred intimacies. I'm Tamara Ridge, your companion and guide. Each episode of this podcast explores a facet of connection with the divine, yourself, others, and the world, offering clear markers to recognize, gentle practices to try, and stories that help you grow what's strong and tend to what needs to grow. Move at your pace and use the name for the holy that fits your heart. This isn't therapy or advice. It's a meeting of souls, a place to listen deeply, ask real questions, and remember the wisdom already within you. I invite you now to take a breath. Let's begin. So I got married the first time when I was 23 years old. And honestly, I did it because all of my Mormon friends were already married. Happened when they were 18 or 19. And so according to my thinking as a Mormon, I was an old maid at 23. So I got married against what my friends thought I should do. I got married to somebody who was 11 years my senior and very controlling. I stayed 14 years, right? So I knew a month in that I had made a mistake and called my mom and was crying and said I made a mistake, and she said the D word. And we'd been married in the temple. And so I said, no, I'm going to make it work. Well, one of the things I know is that you can't make it work when only one person is trying to make it work. So I pretzeled myself in all of the ways that you do to try to win the love of someone who doesn't love you. And after 14 years, I left the marriage. When I left, I had to unravel the most insidious beliefs that he had used to control me. I often talk about emotional abuse is harder to heal from than physical abuse, because physical abuse has bruises. Emotional abuse doesn't have any evidence that you can see. And the reason I'm doing this special series, it's 8-part actually with Why I Say God, episode 9, is that I realized, I was thinking about it the other evening and realizing that if we cannot name the abuse, we cannot heal it. So this series is really about naming the abuses so that you can see them in your own life, how the church played into them, and start to put your finger on what needs to be healed. So I remember feeling completely like I was in the twilight zone when I left that marriage. I didn't know what was real. I didn't know what was manipulation. So I had to test everything. I remember being so confused about being able to trust myself or believing in a worldview that had been forced upon me. It sounds absurd, but I remember looking at the sky closely, really, studying it to see if it was actually green, like he said it was, and slowly beginning to start to trust my own eyes again. Now, he didn't literally tell me that the sky was green, but when someone tells you things over and over again just to control you, and you start to believe those things, then it's very hard to know that you can trust your own senses. That's what abuse does to you. It makes you doubt the most basic observable truths. It trains you slowly, very methodically, to override your own perception and accept someone else's version of reality, even when your body, your gut, your spirit is screaming that something is wrong. So I thought I'd left that behind when I escaped that marriage. But years later, when I finally walked away from the church, I realized something that shook me to the core. I'd been doing the exact same thing my entire spiritual life, swallowing that the sky is green. Let me tell you what I mean. I had served as a Relief Society spiritual living teacher, and one Sunday I chose to go off manual. If you're LDS or post-LDS, you'll know what happened next. I was released the next week. I was punished for independent thought and for an authentic spiritual teaching that brought insights to the women in that room, that brought tears to their eyes, but they were not approved. I went deeper than the lesson manual allowed. I trusted my own spiritual experiences over the prescribed church curriculum. Just like my marriage, I was told your perception is wrong. Your spiritual experiences don't count if they contradict what we have told you to believe. If you can't feel the spirit in the lessons in the manual, it's your fault, your faith problem, not a problem with the lessons. And you may remember, you may understand what it feels like to have that tension between the same things repeated over and over and over again and not being inspirational anymore. So you want to go deeper. Same thing happened for me in the temple. I'd gone month after month after month since the time I was endowed at the age of 21. By the time I left at 43, I was questioning, why don't I feel anything in the temple? What's wrong with me? I realized it wasn't me. But what broke my heart when I finally saw it clearly is that I had spent decades looking at the spiritual sky, being told it was green, and forcing myself to see green even when everything in me knew it was blue. I trained myself to doubt my own spiritual experiences if they didn't match the approved narrative. I learned to silence my questions before they could even form completely. I performed certainty when I felt confusion. I bore testimony of things, saying I knew them to be true when I had no clue and was holding secret doubts. I smiled and nodded while my soul was screaming, because in oppressive religious systems, questioning isn't treated as a path to deeper truth. It's treated as sin. Let me be really clear about what thought control looks like in religious systems, because it's often disguised as devotion. Thought control disguised as I'm following the prophet or follow the prophet. Your independent thinking is reframed as disobedience to God's chosen authority. Remember those temple worthiness interviews where it asks you if you support the local leadership all the way up to the prophet? That's code for you never disagree. If you disagree, you're not thinking differently. You're being deceived by Satan. You are unworthy. Critical thinking is reframed as pride or apostasy. Asking questions, wanting evidence, seeking clarity. These natural human capacities are labeled as spiritual or worthiness failures. You're taught that doubt is the opposite of faith, when actually questioning can be the deepest form of seeking truth. The next example is indoctrination being presented as truth with no room for questioning. I played the piano for primary for 4 years. And so I witnessed this myself. I was there faithfully every single Sunday in the primary playing piano, 2 hours at a time every Sunday. You're taught from childhood that certain beliefs are absolute, unchangeable, and questioning them is dangerous. The message is clear. Conformity equals safety, even happiness. Curiosity equals threat. It brings to mind right now, I don't know if any of you know the movie, I'm dating myself severely now, Logan's Run. In Logan's Run, people had these little jewels in their hand that turned red and started blinking when they came to the age of 21. I think 21. And when that happened, all of the people who had the blinking stone in their hand would then go to this beautifully orchestrated ceremony where essentially all of those people were evaporated with a laser. And it was called spiritual elevation. They were going into their next experience. Well, yeah, they were, but not in the way they were being taught. So the movie is really about a sandman who is supposed to enforce the law and make sure that all the people with the flashing crystals went to the laser the two old ones ceremony. And he got to the age where he needed to go be lasered too. And he decided it was time to run. That's why it's called Logan's Run. But this feels the same. It's so funny. I think sometimes when you get outside of the church and you look in and you look back, you can go, wow, look at all of the farce here, but can't recognize it while you're there. Go look up Logan's Run, watch the movie. It'll be fun for you. But here's the most painful thought control strategy. It is that changing your mind equals losing your eternal family. So the cost of thinking differently isn't just intellectual, it's relational, eternal, and catastrophic. I remember when I left the church, I had to hold the very painful reality that my family would now believe that I was going to be going to an outer darkness that I don't believe exists. But I had to live with their pain because they had been promised by being sealed in the temple their family would be forever together, and I broke that. So it's either break it and deal with people's disappointment, or you learn to police your own thoughts before they can threaten your sense of belonging. This kind of thought control extracts a devastating price. You learn constant self-censorship where you shut down your own thoughts before anyone else can judge them. You judge yourself negatively and keep your mouth shut. You become your own thought police. And when you find yourself with doubts, you get overwhelming anxiety. So instead of expressing curiosity because you know it's natural and healthy, your doubt triggers panic. You start to wonder, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just believe? Am I losing my testimony? Am I being deceived? I remember the moment I was sitting in fast and testimony meeting, and somebody who was a peer went on a mission, and she came back and she said, I know Joseph Smith saw what he said he saw. And I sat there thinking, oh, that's a good one. That's what I'm going to start saying. I wonder how often this happens, how often people will acknowledge it. But we lose trust in our own spiritual experiences. So if your personal revelation contradicts the official narrative, you're taught to dismiss it. You can't be right. Think about this. Bishops, who are the ones who are in charge of a ward family, are supposed to be the only people who are, and patriarchs, who are in a position to be able to get inspiration for you. So if a bishop says something for you and you intuitively know something different, then you're wrong, because you have to support and, sustain the priesthood, the position of the bishop. And that guy could be a plumber. He could be a pedophile. He could be abusing his wife behind closed doors. But you have to dismiss your own knowing if it doesn't match his. Over time, you stop trusting your own direct connection with the divine, and you start performing belief to stay safe and to get a sense of belonging. That's where I was coming from when I said, every time I bore my testimony afterwards, I know Joseph Smith saw what he said he saw. Okay, I'm calling BS because it was. But it happens a lot, I think. You learn to say the right words. You learn to nod at the right moments. You learn to cry, because in Mormon circles, crying equals spirituality. You perform certainty that you don't feel, because this is spiritual abuse. And it's incredibly common. So, how do we reclaim freedom of thought after years of religious thought control? First, give yourself permission to question everything, including what you've been taught about God. You don't have to accept inherited beliefs just because they were handed down with authority. You're allowed to examine them, test them, keep what resonates with your lived experience, and release what doesn't. God is not threatened by your questions. Controlling systems are. Next, develop a journaling practice. Write down, what do I actually believe versus what was I taught to believe? Make 2 columns. In one column, write the beliefs you were given. In the other, write what you actually think and feel when you're honest with yourself. You might be surprised by the gap. That gap is where your authentic spiritual path begins. The third practice that I want to introduce to you today is a somatic anchor practice. Put your hand on your heart and say out loud, my questions are sacred. My doubts make me worthy. Feel that in your body. Let your nervous system hear it. Your questions aren't threats to God. They're invitations to deeper intimacy. When anxiety comes up around questioning, return to this anchor. My questions are sacred. My doubts make me worthy. Breathe. Remind yourself, curiosity is not rebellion. Here's what I've come to know in my bones after years of healing from religious thought control. God gave you a mind, curiosity, and discernment. Using them isn't rebellion. It's worship. True intimacy with God requires you to think for yourself, not to perform certainty when you don't feel it, not to silence your questions to protect someone else's authority, but to engage honestly, curiously, authentically with your own spiritual journey. If your spiritual path requires you to betray your own mind, it's not a path toward the divine. It's a path toward control. God is not served by your intellectual surrender. The divine is served by your authentic seeking. The sky was always blue, beloved. You just needed permission to see it and to say what you can see. Your questions are sacred. Your doubts are part of your spiritual journey, not evidence of failure. And thinking for yourself, truly, deeply thinking for yourself, is one of the most courageous acts of spiritual intimacy that you can practice. Welcome back to your own mind. Welcome back to your sacred curiosity. God has been waiting for you to trust yourself all along. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your story. What questions have you been afraid to ask? What beliefs are you reconsidering? Send me a DM on Instagram or Facebook. I read and respond to every message. And if you're ready to go deeper into reclaiming your spiritual freedom, take my Sacred Intimacy Snapshot. It's at innerlightcompanion.com. It's a 5-minute quiz, 2 questions to help you identify where to begin on your journey of reconstruction. You could also download my free guided meditation for navigating hard emotions. That's a 10-minute practice to help you reconnect with your body's wisdom when you're processing religious trauma. Next Friday, we're diving into episode 3, Freedom of Expression and Communication. Silenced in the name of God, reclaiming your voice. Until then, keep questioning. Keep seeking. Keep trusting yourself. You're not alone in this. Thanks for listening. As you step into your day, notice which intimacies stirred for you. And then choose one small practice and let it meet you where you are. You want support? Grab the free Sacred Intimacy Snapshot. And when you're ready, the full Sacred Intimacy Assessment that can guide your next steps. Links are in the show notes. Until next time, walk gently, listen deeply, and trust the light within.